Good morning, everybody. It's Saturday morning. I just got out of the shower. My hair's wet. Get ready to go digging. I'm going to go out today and maybe try to pick up a couple records. I might do, if I find some stuff, I'll do a video and let's show you guys what I found. Feeling really good, man. The more sober I get, the better I feel, man. And the more I want to wear my Grateful Dead shirt, man. I feel good, and I feel good wearing my Grateful Dead shirt, man. I don't know. I know that sounds silly, but I want to talk to you guys about stereo stuff just for a minute or so. I don't know how long. This is just a video without any starter in. I'm just going to get on here and babble about stereo stuff for a second, if that's all right. Because I was thinking, well, I've been watching more like Steve Guttenberg. Man, I love his channel. He was on there talking about stereo stuff and the way things sound. And I mean, he's got a fantastic channel. I'm sure if you guys are into stereo stuff, you guys know who Steve Guttenberg is, man. He's just a great guy. But he was talking about sound, and I couldn't agree. I was like, man, nobody talks about sound. The imperfections of sound and stuff, and that kind of stuff really fascinates me. The little fly trying to land on my camera there. But anyway, think about this. Most people, not all people, okay, and you say, well, I have, but most people have never heard a real tube amp. They've never heard a real tube amp. But I was sitting there thinking about that yesterday, man, and I was like, wow. And you'll say, well, what is a real tube amp? And to me, a real tube amp is something vintage, okay? It's a vintage style amp, something with the old, hand wound copper transformers. It's got the old tubes, the old 6BQ5s or something, the 65, 71, 60, is it 71 or 91? Anyway, I've got that in my Kenwood, but a lot of people have never heard a real tube amp, and that's what a real tube amp is, because you wouldn't have this, I mean, think about it. You would not have the modern tube amps without the old tube amps, and it's like, if you watch some of these channels, and they do these videos on these modern, and I'm not opposed to the modern tube amps. I'm not opposed to them, but I just don't consider them, the real, if it's like a list of the real tube amps, they're on the list, but they're not the real tube amps. But it's, you see them, and they got these tube amps, and guess what? They're still using NOS tubes, new old stock tubes in them. They get them and they test them, and they're using old stock tubes. Why? Because that's just the way that it is, man. The old tube amps are just the way to go. And they just made things so much better back then, in my opinion. I mean, because you got to think, man, I've got amps built back in the 60s, in the 50s. In the 50s, I've got tube amps from the 50s that still work today, and they sound beautiful. I mean, think about that for a build quality, So, being a stereo guy, I like solid state equipment as well. But, it was just something in my soul, man, when it was like, I need a tube amp in my life. There was a time in my life when I said, I need a tube amp. And I remember I got on eBay and I found this amp. It was a Dynaco SCA35 tube amp. Okay, it was like an integrated amp, didn't have a tuner on it. And I think it had the Bugle Boy tubes in it. I do believe it had the Bugle Boy tubes, which are just beautiful. And Dynaco, their transformers are fantastic, man. They make some of the best transformers, on par with the higher end stuff. Even though they're solid state stuff, a lot of people, they knock the solid state stuff because, it's kits, it was kits. And they veer away from it because they're afraid to buy somebody else's kit. But if you got a good service guy, I wouldn't be too afraid. But I remember when I bought my first Dynaco SE A35 tube amp, and I didn't really have any good speakers at the time. I just had these, you know, these tower speakers from the 90s. Okay, they were like, who made them? They were like Techniques or something. You know, they were just, you know, the big ones. They were laminated, and you know, they just sounded cheap and stuff. But that's all I had at the time. But I wanted to have, I was like, I got to have a tube amp in my life. So I bought that, and I hooked it up. And if you ever hook an old tube amp up, let me tell you something. Always make sure that your speakers are plugged into it, okay? Because they don't have power protection. You know, like you turn on your amp, and it could go into protection mode, or you can hear the protection circuit kick in. The old tube amps don't do that, okay? So make sure that you have your speakers hooked up before you hit that power button, because you could mess your amp up, and you got to make sure that you got it right, hooked up to the right ohms on your. Make sure you know, do a little research and figure out how to hook it up properly. You know, don't just hit the switch and hope for the best. You know, you don't want to take care of that thing's old. You want to make sure you take care of it. You don't want to blow it up because you don't know what you're doing. But I remember it's like when I was listening to it, I was sitting there in the living room, and that's with these cheap speakers. And I had my Pioneer turntable, and I had a Shure M44-7 cartridge on it, right? Which I love that cartridge. I still love it to this day. And, you know, and I've got, you know, $400 or $500 cartridges in there, but I really still love that Shure M44-7 cartridge. They, you know, they were $50. I bought them brand new back in the day, and I've got a couple of them still, and I just love them. They're really hot cartridges. They're not the best balanced and all that kind of stuff, but I don't care, man. I just like the way they sound. But anyway, I had that cartridge on, and I was sitting there in my living room listening to this little Dynaco, and this thing was like, you know, like a 10 or 15 watts, very low wattage, you know, so you don't even have so much volume on it. And that's one of the downfalls to an old tube amp, is a lot of times they don't have a whole lot of power versus your 100-watt solid state. You know, they're not gonna knock the pictures off your wall. You know, to me, I don't care. You know, some of you guys, you want to rock out with your garage rock and knock the pictures off the wall. You might want to, you know, think about getting a small wattage tube amp. You know, get something with more power. That's one of the downfalls. But I was listening to my Dynaco, man, and the sound was liquefied, man, in my room. And even with these speakers, and it was just like this. I was listening to this stuff, and there was things happening, man, where the sound was coming off of the walls. The separation was incredible. It was kind of a heavy sound. It had this heavy sound, but the treble and the guitars and stuff, they were still coming through the weight of the amp, and it was just magical, man. It was just, and I was blown away, man. I had a Pioneer, which one was it? The Pioneer 850. I gave that to Steve. He's got it now. He's enjoyed it. But at the time, I had that Pioneer, and it was just such a different experience, okay? And I love my Pioneer, you know. It was wonderful. I got one sitting over here right now, but I love the sound of the Pioneer. But to me, it didn't compare to the sound and what was happening with that Dynaco. And, well, one day it just quit working. Something happened. I don't know what happened, but one day it just quit working. Something gave out in it. So I just put it in the closet. I let it sit in the closet for about a year or so. And then one day I was like, you know, I think I'm going to sell it. I had this stupid idea to sell my Dynaco, my first tube amp. And my dumb ass, I sold it. And I've always regretted getting rid of it. I got more money. It wasn't even working. I put it back on eBay. And I told him, I said, it doesn't work. And I got more money. I got like $400 for this thing. And it wasn't even working on eBay. It was crazy. And this was years ago. But I always regretted it, man. And I'm always looking for a Dynaco. One day, I'm going to get me another Dynaco SCA 35 tube amp, just because I just really love the sound. And a Kenwood, I've got a Kenwood 1100 tube receiver in there, and it sounds a lot like my Dynaco. Okay, it has more power. It has the bigger tubes. I think they're 6591s if I'm right. I'm not a tube, I don't have all that shit in my brain, but it's like a 30 or 40 watt tube amp. Everything's tubes in the amp. It's been serviced. I took it to Columbus and Stereo Lab. They went through it for me, and they tested all the capacitors, and they replaced the ones that were out of spec. And I told them, I said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, And then I had to buy some more power tubes for it, and it took me a couple years, man, because I took it to 3 different places before I could find somebody that was actually courteous and fair enough to fix it properly for less than $1,000. I mean, it was just ridiculous. Some of these people, what they want to charge to work on your stuff. But my Kenwood, it sounds very similar with more power to my Dynaco. But I'd say that probably the edge on the difference was probably because the Bugle Boy tubes that I had in my Dynaco probably gave it a little bit more sweetness with the weight. And it's like my Kenwood, it has a little bit of sweetness with the weight. Now I've got a Fischer 400 tube receiver, and it's really a sweet receiver. It's very well balanced. I think it's like 30 watts per channel. I really enjoy it. But I think, preference-wise, personal preference-wise, I think I like the Kenwood a little bit better. And anybody that has the Fischer 400 knows that that's a fantastic amp. So, here's what I would say. If you're a stereo guy, or you like the old soul music, you know what I'm saying? Old soul, old jazz, and Brenda Lee's, and shit like that, or maybe, I'm just saying, if you're a stereo guy, you got to have a tube amp. You got to have, and what I would recommend is getting something older, find something that's been serviced, it's got good tubes in it, somebody you could trust, you can get on there and, whether it's on eBay or somebody, private seller, or somewhere near where you live, just make sure that they know what the hell they're doing and it's been serviced properly. But, there's downfalls, there's upsides and downsides to tube amps, and here's the thing about tube amps is they all sound different. I can plug in each one of my amps. I've got a little Maggie console amp with the 6BQ5s in it, and it sounds different. I plug it in, go to my Fischer, it sounds different. Go to my Kenwood, it sounds different. Listen to the Dynaco, it sounded different. They all sound different. Okay, so that's another thing. They all have their own personal character. So, you have to do your research and read up on which one you want. But, I mean, if you're a stereo guy, you got to have an old tube amp. I mean, an old tube amp. Find you an old Scott integrated amp, that's beautiful. It's got good tubes in it, stuff like that. Keep what you got, though. Keep the stereo that you have. Don't get rid of the stereo, and go buy a tube amp. Say, oh, Brother Brian said to go buy one. No, here's what I'm saying. Keep what you got. And then in the future, find you a nice old tube amp to play around with, That's what I'm saying, okay? Because everybody, if you like the old soul music, man, nothing sounds better, man. To put the wax on the record, drop that needle, and have them tubes, man. I'm telling you, it sounds beautiful. Just a beautiful sound. And the distortion on the tube amps, they're higher. Okay, so you got to expect a little imperfection. Sometimes, none of my amps make any noise. They're all quiet. But sometimes, tube amps make a little noise. They get a little fussy sometimes. And you got to expect that. Don't freak out. Oh, I got to get it to the service place. Get freaked out. Because if you've never had a real tube amp, you do get nervous about them. Because they're just so different. They're so old. It makes people nervous, but don't be nervous, just expect some imperfections, expect a little higher distortion rate in some things. That's why they invented the solid state, is so they could get higher volume, more wattage with lower distortion rates and all that shit. But it's like, oh, whatever. But, you know, the nice thing with the tube amps is you're going to get a way different experience when you're listening to your music than you are with your solid state. That's just a fact. And that's the thing about the modern tube amps nowadays is, to me, they just sound like a warm, solid, modern. They just like a solid state amp. They sound like a solid state amp. And, you know, to me, it's just like, you know, if you're going tubes, you got to go vintage. You got to have the experience of that old sound. You know what I'm saying? The old sound is so much different. And that's the thing, is like these modern amps, you know, they always want to stick something on the computer and measure the sound and all that. Fuck that, man. Let your ears be the witness to the sound. You know what I'm saying? Because that computer, fuck that computer. You know, don't worry about that computer. That was kind of my philosophy in my walk with stereo stuff, being an audiophile, is you know, opinions vary. You know, computers are bullshit, you know, when it comes to that measuring stuff, you know, and I know they got their purpose and stuff like that, but ultimately, it's your ears and your own personal opinion about what you like and how it sounds to you. You know what I'm saying? So you got to remember that, and that's how I was. I would get something, I'd buy something, and I'd listen to it, and then I'd say, you know what, I know what that sounds like. I don't have to have some computer tells me what it sounds like. I know what it sounds like. So I've had all kinds of stereo gear in my life, and I've experienced it personally, because that's what I want to do. I want to listen to that stuff and experience it for myself. And you should too. You know. And a lot of you that watch my videos, I know you guys are old souls. I know you are. Go get you a Miles Davis. You know, get an old Miles Davis or Donald Byrd. You know, get some Albert King. You know what I'm saying? Or some old Hank. And I'm telling you, man, that tube amp will take you to another level, man. It is beautiful. Hey, I'm getting ready to go digging. I'll make another video. This is just I'm just babbling about stereo stuff. I might pull my Kenwood out later. If I pick up some records today, I might pull my Kenwood out later, and I'll hook it up, and we'll play around with that, and I'll show you some records and stuff, man. You guys have a good rest of your day. Brother Brian's out of here.